We hear end of the world talk from all corners of the public so-called intellectual sphere or whatever, and yeah, this has been going on for well centuries. Really, this is nothing new at all. People were predicting the end of the world back in every century, I think, so far, going back through our history. It seems to be a deep-rooted part of our culture. We've got people sort of banging on about the Book of Revelations and this, that, and the other, and how society's all going to pot, and it'll be the end of the world, and God's day of judgment will be upon us. You have people talking about that sort of stuff in the 15th century. Nothing really has changed in form. So since then, really, I wouldn't have said so much now with nuclear weapons and the war in Ukraine and the war in Palestine and all these sorts of things. People say that it's going to lead to World War III is going to break out any day now. I used to hear as a kid from this friend of my father's, Iran will bomb Israel. They will nuke Israel. Like, no, they won't. Not going to bomb Israel with a nuke. If Iran got hold of a single nuke, I don't think the first thing and it's like that they would do it. They would bomb Israel, and they're like, well, a lot of people would say, so what if they did? But there we go. Like, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen quite like that. Like World War III is not going to break out. The war in Ukraine is going to continue. It's going to continue until some peace accord can be drawn between the Ukrainian and Russian governments. I don't think Russia is ever likely to be able to successfully invade and well, they've invaded Ukraine, obviously, but they'll never be able to successfully take all that territory. Ukraine is very, very large, has a very large number of people in Ukraine, the overwhelming majority of which have no interest at all in living under Vladimir Putin's police state. Putin will be able to take some of it, maybe. He'll never be able to hold it, though. That's the major underlying tactical issue with, I think, the war in Ukraine. It's not going to happen. He will never be able to keep hold of that territory, not with all the people of Ukraine armed and making Molotov cocktails and whatnot else to constantly repel a Russian force of how many soldiers to try and contain the uprisings and so on that will undoubtedly be sprawling across Ukraine. It could be incredibly bloody. It could be incredibly violent, but Zelensky and his troops managed to repel them, and they got as far as Kiev in the first instance. Now they've been beaten back into the Donbass region again, and he's repelling them very effectively from the sea. And it's just going kind of like this, like forwards, backwards, and more and more and more. So it seems in what I've managed to hear of the war reportage and things like this. No, the World War III is not going to break out. And you hear like generals, or heads of the British Army in the United Kingdom talking about bringing back conscription. Like, I don't think we're going to bring back conscription. I don't think anyone here would stand for it either if we did. I think it's a ridiculous notion to have in the 21st century that we should have what is more or less a slave army of conscripts, or an army of people being coerced into fighting with the threat of prison or whatever. No, it's absolutely it's insane. It's draconian, it's retrograde, it's abhorrent. It's not going to happen. We wouldn't allow it to happen. Not now. Or hopefully we wouldn't. But I mean, this is how scare stories in the media manage to propagate and circulate. It's just, more... People almost want to believe it. People find it very dramatic, very... appealing on a level to some people, particularly the old, who remember days gone by in the 1950s or not the 60s, but the 50s, when we still had conscription, we still had national service and all this sort of thing, and it was a bloody good thing that we had it, and all this rah nonsense rhetoric. Like, we don't need it now. I mean, the principal reason why we don't need national service and such huge armies anymore is because we have nuclear weapons. We don't need such large armed forces because, we can just wipe out a very large armed force with a nuclear attack. That's also, and if we were to have a war with Russia, I mean, some people are saying that we're going to have war with Russia, we're going to have World War III. Like, no, we're not. Like, what are the Russians going to do? They're going to sweep across Europe, are they? With what army are they? Where's Putin going to get the troops from? He can't, he's not actually all that popular as a leader at the moment in his own country. He's struggling to find the men for Ukraine. He had the Wagner group turn on him basically. No, it's not going to happen. Like, what's going to happen in Ukraine is it will peter out eventually. And we've just got to keep supplying them with weapons, keep supplying them with fighter planes, keep supplying them with everything else that they need to fight Putin effectively. They'll supply themselves with men for the war effort, and so on, and that's how it'll continue. And they seem to be very effective at repelling Russia's advances, repelling Russia's attacks at the moment. And it stands to reason that, I think they'll probably be as good at it in the future defending their homeland. And we needn't get involved anyway. We needn't have boots on the ground. We needn't have NATO involvement in Ukraine. Or like if Ukraine joined NATO at any point, is that tantamount to the Third World War? A NATO versus Russia conflict, albeit a sort of border conflict between Russia and the NATO area, which is what it would be if it incorporated Ukraine. I suppose it would be. But then you could argue perhaps World War III was the Cold War and the series of proxy wars fought between the United States and the Soviet Union around the world. From Nicaragua, El Salvador, Vietnam, I suppose you could argue was not really a Soviet proxy war, but they were getting their Kalashnikovs from somewhere, right? And they had the support of the Soviet Union, the Vietnamese army, communists. But it's not going to happen. Well, it does happen, and it's the Third World or the Fourth World War at the moment, and it's just really an issue of branding and how the media choose to spin things. You could make a case, I guess, that the Cold War was a world war. You'd make a case that like proxy wars like the Afghan-Soviet war, that was just US-backed Taliban militias in Afghanistan repelling the Soviet invasion. That was an element of the series of conflicts that World War III, i.e. the Cold War, amounted to. But it's a Cold War. It's not a shooting war. It just includes many shooting wars and Vietnam and all these sorts of things. And this is the problem. Like, it's Chomskyan, isn't it? It's how it's manufacturing consent. It's how the media choose to spin things. But I mean, what we're really worried about with Ukraine, of course, is it going nuclear. Well, it sort of almost did when Putin was taking. Putin's forces were using a nuclear power station seemingly as target practice. But I mean, another Chernobyl, I don't think that was ever likely. Well, was it likely to happen? Who knows what was likely to happen at the time? It's incredibly worrying, incredibly distressing when this sort of nonsense breaks out. But the thing about the war in Ukraine, the thing about it is, what typifies it as an evil action, just like any evil action, in my own theory of evil, like Hannah Arendt's notion of the banality of evil, I believe in the ultimate futility of evil behaviour. Things which are evil are ultimately futile. Such as, most war is futile. It has to come to an end at some point. There's no such thing as a practicable forever war, and it's an evil thing to promote such ideas and to think, and like what Christopher Hitchens ridiculously suggested about the Afghan war being a forever war. It'll be a forever training ground against jihad. Like, well, that couldn't fucking last forever now, could it? It's like all wars can't last forever because they become so very unpopular with their own people. The likes of Trump get elected and end it like that, and the Taliban comes sweeping into Kabul, etc., etc. Or they just run out of munitions, run out of supplies, run out of. It becomes too costly. The military-industrial complex, and things like bullets and guns and soldiers, like those cost money. You've got to pay soldiers, you've got to pay mercenaries. Like the military-industrial complex, makes money for people, and like you've got this Russell Brand style rhetoric. Yes, military-industrial complex, man. It's just all this like money. It's like, yeah, but it actually costs the United States government money to buy fighter planes and things and to buy weapons and bullets, and it does cost them money. So wars become unpopular with the people if they weren't unpopular with them to begin with. They managed to manufacture consent for the war for whatever reason they wanted it to it. They make money, maybe, yeah, like Boeing and so on make money out of it, but ultimately they lose money down the line. That's the other element of it. That's when like the bubble bursts. So yes, well, military industrial complex is a very dangerous thing, and you've got boom and bust cycles of economics involved in the military industrial complex, but ultimately underlies the futility of such actions. And what Putin is doing in Ukraine is just foolish, crazy. He will never win. He'll never win that in a million years. He'll just run out of troops. Eventually, he'll run out of tanks, and he'll never be able to start like a Soviet-style military-industrial complex ever again, because what Stalin had to play with in terms of getting 5-year plans off the ground, and he had like Eastern Europe as well behind that system of labour, and had Ukraine. Well, he did terrible things. Stalin did terrible things in Ukraine, but it was part of the USSR at the time. It was a different geopolitical framework. What Putin's doing now with Russia is doomed to failure. And it's futile and incredibly stupid. Hence, wars are just war is stupid. War should never happen. That's the thing about war. It's idiotic. Very often, and necessary often to defeat people like Hitler. But good cases can be made on either sides. But yeah, certain wars, certain conflicts, such as this Ukraine conflict, are deeply futile, and we're not as doomed as we think. Not in the West anyway. Are we doomed? Most certainly not. If anything, we'll be fine in Britain. We'll be A-OK. We are not going to get nukes, and the Russians are not going to arrive on our beaches anytime soon. Like some mass media sources would like to claim, or like Sir Russell Brand would like to claim, it's not going to happen. But yeah, like it's tragic, it's awful, it's disgusting. You can see children's legs sticking out of rubble, revolting. But and Hamas Israel stuff, equally deplorable. Both sides done terrible things. Hamas did a terrible thing by massacring so many Israelis. Israel have done terrible things in their retaliation against Palestine as opposed to Hamas. And then again, who among the Palestinians are Hamas anyway? Who the fuck are those people? You see what I mean? It's no side is a particularly great side in that conflict, in the Israel-Palestine conflict. But the Ukrainians, I ain't seen what the fuck they've done to Putin exactly by wanting to join the EU and NATO, which they overwhelmingly do. And the likes of Russell Brand, the likes of certain, pundits on the left, it seems if Russell Brand's even on the left at the moment. I don't know, who he, what's it claims, somehow a US military-industrial complex thing for, giving, free munitions and armaments and support and aid to Ukraine. I think we're making money out of that. No, we're not. We're giving away our fighter planes and things, and our rocket missile bombs and things. They're not paying us for them, I don't think. I don't think they should be either. And Ukraine is not an unwealthy country as I understand it, but the point is they can't afford it because they've got a war going on and a war economy. And Putin's wanted to invade Ukraine basically since he took power in Russia. This is, it's dreadful. But somehow it isn't the US being evil this time, unfortunately for conspiracy theorists. But yeah, That is what it is. And I think we're going to be okay. And I don't think World War III is going to break out, or it has already broken out decades ago. And now we're into World War motherfucking 4. Let's go.